Thanks for joining us this morning as we look at 5 lost cities in the Bible that archaeologists have since discovered, otherwise known as
GPS recalculating.
That's right. Some scholars thought these cities were either made up in the Bible, exaggerated, maybe not described correctly, or something. They were put in the Bible and they were questioned later, specifically in about the mid 19th century. A lot of the questions began to arise about it, and they thought that maybe these authors, the authors of the Bible, had put it in there for some kind of nefarious reason. And we'll go over each one. We're going to explore these cities to find out who challenged their existence and why, and then discover the evidence of their existence. Now, this is such a broad subject and so deep. There's no way that I can give it the time and effort it needs for 5. And I don't have the background as an archaeologist to go into great detail with any kind of authority. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig a little bit, and then I'm going to refer you to some other videos that are in here. And these would be used as tools for your own study and discovery, if you like. And it's more of a referral, and then we'll look at questions that you guys have, kind of bouncing things back and forth. But some of these are really kind of cool. And then the whole approach in the mid 19th century that brought a lot of these places into question. We'll kind of look at where that came from too, where that was all explored. Over the last few weeks, we've looked at the evidence for the textual reliability of the Bible, and that means what we have is within a high degree of precision the words that the original authors wrote. Yet in the 19th century, skepticism grew regarding the historicity of the cities that the Bible is talking about, with some of them dismissing them as mere mythological constructs. However, the tide turned with the advent of modern archaeology and excavations under tangible evidence for these ancient urban centers. How important would you say it is that these cities existed, or they were described the way that they were in the Bible? They actually line up with historical archaeological evidence?
I'd say extremely valuable. I mean, if you're looking at the Bible as an actual account of history, now again, we got to take it into account that this is from perspective.
Right.
So if someone says, "Oh man, this is a huge city. It was overwhelming the size." Well, that's from the country. So yeah, from the city might seem like a small podunk town,
right?
But a guy who's never seen the city going into the city would describe it as such. So do remember, point of view is critical to take into account, but having it line up historically that these cities actually did exist, that there were, or these entire nations did exist and were influential, I think is critical in order to confirm the Bible's authenticity.
Yeah. So what about the idea that you could have these, basically they're just myths, that it's not really, these places didn't really exist. They're just more of an allegory. We're just trying to get the point across on the message. Is sort of like, Jesus' parables when he talks about a farmer doing this and this. It may not be a specific farmer. He's just talking about the general idea. Would that be a way then to look at some of these cities and to say that, it really doesn't matter because it's just the main point of what they're trying to do, the myth?
Well, it depends on what section of the Bible you're getting this from. If it's from the historical books saying, hey, these were actual places that did exist, this is what happened, no, that would be a horrible way of looking at it. But if it is from one of Jesus' parables, then that's different.
Right.
Because it's intended to be a parable.
That's right.
If it's not intended to be a parable, no, you should not be putting on it that way.
Yeah. If the Bible says that Pontius Pilate did such and such, we should say that there is an historical figure named Pontius Pilate. It's treating it as an historical event. That's one thing that we have to be careful about. The Bible is not just one specific type of genre. It's several. There's poetry, there's history, there's narrative, there's all sorts of different genres that are wrapped up in there. You have the book of Revelation, which is apocryphal, which means there's a specific way of giving the message. And so when you look at these different sections, say, well, when Jesus said, "I am the door, I am the way," he's not saying that he's a road, physically, that he's going to lay down and he's going to be a part of the pavement. Obviously, that's not the case. That when speaking like that, there is a metaphor or an allegory that's involved with it. So we want to look at each of these states each of these cities. And among these cities, once doubted but now confirmed by archaeological findings, are Ai, or I. Sorry, it looks like an AI. That's how you spell it, AI, but I believe it's pronounced I. Jericho, Nineveh, and Babylon. In this stream, we're going to journey through the skepticism to the confirmation for each of these cities, highlighting the evidence that challenged their existence and the discoveries that ultimately validated their place in history. So the first one that we're going to look at is Ur of the Chaldees. This is mentioned in the book of Genesis. And Terah took Abraham his son, and Lot the son of Hagar, son of Haran and his son, and Sarah and his daughter-in-law, his son Abraham's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur to the Chaldees to go to the land of Canaan, and they came to Haran and dwelt there. So this is talking specifically about the journey that Abraham had taken. And the map here is showing where we believe Ur of the Chaldees is. You can see it rest there towards the north end of the Persian Gulf. Ur is the birthplace of the patriarch Abraham. It's located, as you can see, in modern-day Iran. You really can't see that on the map, but maybe the exploded map, you can see it there. However, doubts regarding its existence persisted for a century when some scholars, considering it a mere literary creation, one of the main challenges to Ur's historicity stemmed from the lack of physical evidence corroborating its portrayal in the Bible. So the absence of archaeological findings directly linking to the biblical or raised doubts about its existence. And this is one of the questions that would be thrown at basically all these cities at the beginning, is say, listen, we don't see where this is, so we can't confirm its existence. In the New Testament, when it talks about Paul going to Rome, we know we're able to follow its location throughout history. But some of these other places were buried, like the ziggurat here in this image, buried in time, buried in sand. And maybe there are some local customs that would say this place existed, but in the mid-19th century, that was mostly laughed off. That a lot of people would say, "Hey, you can't trust these Bedouins, these local people, for whatever myth or lore that they have." But actually, be kind of correct. So this is believe this is the Great Ziggurat in what is now understood to be Ur, and this is the reconstructed efforts that were done under Saddam Hussein, believe it or not, of all people. He did this, I believe, this one, and also Nineveh and Babylon, which we're going to talk about later. There's a lot of reconstruction. Here you have a artist rendition of what Nineveh could have looked like. I'm sorry, Nineveh, what Ur could have looked like. So skeptics such as German theologian Julius Wellhausen argued that biblical narrative surrounding Ur was merely a product of mythologization and legendary embellishments. But archaeological excavations conducted in the 19th and 20th centuries in modern-day Iraq unearthed Ur as the remains of this ancient city. Discoveries of this site include monumental structures, royal tombs, and artifacts dating back to the Bronze Age, lining it with biblical descriptions of Ur's grandeur and significance. inscriptions discovered by the British archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley mentioned the city by name, further confirming the identification with the biblical Ur. So I'm going to check chat real quick to see what we have going on here, and just put these up without reading them. Go using that Greek bashing label nefarious again. I believe yes. I don't know about Greek bashing, but great movie. If you have a chance to see it, did a review on it. It's a metaphor. Yes, I guess. Metaphor for what? Maybe talking about what we were. Maybe you can clarify on that. Interesting that Abraham came from what would become Babylon. Yes. Well, being the Fertile Crescent and a lot of civilization was scattered around certain regions. And one thing, it wouldn't be too surprising that he came from one of those locations. I mean, he could have maybe the Hittite region, or maybe some of the other islands around that area, but definitely Ur. And one thing about Abraham that we discovered is that it talks about him with the camels and with trading. It appears that he might have been basically a trade caravan that went with him, a mobile. In order to have trade at that time, you'd have to go through different kingdoms, different countries. You'd have to have an entourage, some of them be armed, because you don't know what you're going to be attacked. If you're carrying goods, you're going through these different city-states. Who knows who's going to attack you in between? So his caravan, it was more than just a UPS truck going across the desert. There was almost, he had to be entirely self-sufficient and moving, and he was not a poor man. This is I wouldn't say he's in Elon Musk of his day, but he was more of a richer individual. So do you have any thoughts on Ur of the Chaldees?
Ur of the Chaldees. Now, this was interesting, again, pointing out that it eventually became Babylon, and that's where he came from. Very, very interesting, definitely the interactions with his descendants and them. It gets kind of messy. But again, these historical points are critical to be able to verify, yes, what we read in the Bible is what we see historically. Something that this doesn't happen for is the Quran. In a lot of cases, we look at the Quran and see historical accounts that contradict it. In fact, Mary Harp over on Reasoned Answers has been diving into this more and more, where they claim Mecca was Medina was a trade center. And it's like, no, the positioning doesn't work. Yeah. Where it's located geographically. I mean, if you look straight down, okay, you could see where it would look fine. But if you look at where it's positioned height-wise, it doesn't make any sense. Because it's up on, one is up on the mountain, one's down in the valley. Why would you go down to it? And looking at the trade records from back then, where the trade paths were that most people went down, it doesn't line up with what's claimed a lot of times. And that would throw a lot of that into question.
Right. So there is with each one of these each one of these cities that we look at, there is going to be a video posted, and it's also in the description of this. You don't see the tag in the card, they call it, in the live stream, but once this has been processed, about 12 hours after this video has been posted, we're going to add the links to these other external videos. So there's a good video that is on Ur that gives you more background to it. Like I say, I can only go so far, and then I'm going to refer you to these other videos. AI is the next one, it's spelled AI, but it pronounced, from what I understand, pronounced as I. This is located near the River Jordan and Jericho. It is okay. Got it. It was part of the path that was in the conquest of Canaan. And that's why you see these three cities highlighted here: Gilgal, Jericho, and Ai. And this was on the path that Joshua had taken the Israelites through this area. So if we're going to establish any historicity with what the accounts in the book of Joshua to say that this did happen, we should be able to find some evidence of these cities. Now, if you don't, you don't. I mean, it's been a long time since this has happened. The conquest of Canaan, I believe, was around 1440 BC. And so over 3,000 years ago, I don't know if I keep tax records that long. So it might be a little bit difficult to keep this all together. So before I look at this next one, I'm going to bring up a chat here. Hey, Karen, I believe you pronounce your last name Weiss? I'm not sure. My son, a Marine, has been to Nineveh. This stuff fascinates us. Yes. One of the things that we have or tend to lack here in the United States is a whole lot of archaeological discoveries. I mean, you do have Indian mounds, you do have other Native American structures that are left, but by and large, those were built with materials that have since been destroyed. And in the Middle East, you have climate such that the dry climate, a lot of hot, it does get hot, but if you have a cave like Qumran, you can store material for a very long time, especially if it's in a jar like Dead Sea Scrolls. So we're unfortunate here that we don't have that kind of history here. And Hutchie is also been around and being a brother in Scotland, he also has a lot more archaeological stuff to find around where he's living. So we're going to take a look at the next one is Ai, and digging deep into this. What the significance of this is, if we can line up where Jericho and Ai are, we can begin to discover, okay, here's evidence showing what happened with Joshua and the conquering of Canaan. In the book of the book of Joshua, it says, "And the Lord said to Joshua, do not fear and do not be dismayed. Take all the fighting men with you and arise and go up to Ai. See, I have given into your hand the king of Ai and his people and his city and land." And it goes on later and describes the city a little bit, that the gates are facing north. And there's some description about where the land lays, and also that the city itself, the description of where the gates are and so forth, that give archaeologists now a certain point to say, hey, we can do this. And the video that is linked in the description talks specifically about the gates of Ai and how they have found some evidence for these. Now the city of Ai had faced some skepticism. When I say city, this is a little tiny dot on a map. It was basically a small fortress used to protect people if they were under invasion. There was a lot of invasion. This was, you can imagine, this is shortly after the Bronze Age collapse. And so the people here were used to this kind of, you got to be on your toes. You have to have your weapons ready to go. And if need be, find a place to hide. So Ai, and here's an artist rendition, is very small. Jericho would have been about 9 acres inside, and Ai would have only been about 2. And there's only so much room that you can, so many people that you can put inside a city. Here's a depiction of one of the pivot rocks that is used for the gate posts for the main gate of the city. And that was one of the things that they used to show evidence for it. But some scholars, again, we're in the mid-19th century, question the reliability of the biblical accounts of the conquest of Ai, citing discrepancies of the narrative and difficulty in locating the site. We can't find it, therefore it didn't exist. I'm glad that's not the case when I can't find my wallet or the keys, because if
That'd be a pain in the
yeah,
rear.
if they just didn't exist because I can't find them, no, that's not the case. In the 1960s, Joseph Calloway excavated what he thought was the location of Ai and found nothing. Found no one living there during the conquest of Canaan, so around the 1440 BC. The absence of archaeological findings, then corresponding to the biblical account of Ai, fueled the skepticism about its existence. But archaeological excavations conducted near modern-day Jerusalem revealed the remains of an ancient city dating back to the Bronze Age and Iron Ages. And that's where these guys come in. Again, I'm going to refer to the video here in once we have that card posted, and also in the descriptions. In addition to that, inscriptions and seal impressions found in the vicinity near the nearby corroborated the identification of this land with the biblical Ai. And one of the problems they had when excavating this, originally in the 1960s, is the archaeologists were just looking on all the high places, all the hills, and found nothing there. And here's an example where the city was actually in the ravine. I don't know why it was placed there, but it was more in the ravine area. And maybe one of the hypotheses is that you can hide a fortress in a ravine. If you put it on the top of the hill, somebody's going to see it, and it's a juicy morsel if it's a small fortress. That was one way of doing it. So we looked at looked at Ai, and now want to take a look at Jericho. If you can imagine, Jericho and Ai surround these two cities side by side, basically, and then Nineveh, and Gilgal in more towards the Jordan. All of these are in the path then of conquest. So you were mentioning some things about with the Quran about archaeological evidence. Is there more?
Oh yeah, there's a lot more to cover with this. In fact, Jay does some interesting studies into this. I'm not 100% on the work that he does. I think he's come to the conclusion that he doesn't even think Muhammad really existed, which would be kind of a big thing.
Yeah, it would be.
But he looked at coin records, what coins were used around the time period, looking at the symbolism used on the coins, diving into that. So I do believe that Muhammad was an actual individual, but he has some interesting studies into that, and we'll see what happens as time reveals. So to be able to look back and say, okay, these cities here that the Bible said existed, archaeological evidence said, we don't know if it actually existed. We can't find it because we're digging in the wrong gosh darn place. Doesn't disprove anything. And finally, when they find it, it does reinforce what we already knew was true. So there's great evidence to that. And I've got more to cover on that.
Okay. Okay.
If you're ready, let's
so the next one would be Jericho. And we'll take a look at this, but I also want to, before I jump into this too quickly, I want to take a look at some comments. It looks like we have some more things come up. And I think that's just personal conversation. Yes. Okay. Just personal conversation back and forth in the chat. Do not want to break that down, except, okay, here we go. Thomas Hall, I think God chose Canaan because it's a crossroads of east and west surrounded through time by the great empires. You had to pick a center of the world, that'd be it. Interesting. So this is going under the assumption that if God is going to be doing something that is going to eventually be global or has the intention of being global, you would want to choose someplace that's not that is very accessible, either by crossroads to be able to get the message out, or somewhere, the center of something, not some desert island somewhere.
Yeah, or in the middle of a desert, suddenly put there using an obscure dialect that's not widely used.
But they did transmit quickly out of there. The Islam spread quickly out of the Arabian Peninsula.
If you kill people, they can spread pretty quickly. If you say either you take this book or I cut your head off.
Yeah.
A lot of people that don't have a backbone will flip.
And that's exactly what Christianity did. Early Christianity did when it started spreading, is it spread by the sword. It started in Palestine and then spread out further.
You gotta be careful. They might clip that.
Judea. Yeah, they might clip that. I'm being sarcastic, of course. If anything, it was the other way around, right? That Christianity was persecuted. It was
so
put under the sword instead. And
yeah, you get the opposite. You get growth in
effect.
Spite of death sentences.
Now, that's not to say that throughout history that there haven't been forced conversions later, but they are few and far between, and not to the scale and the main mode of operation that was used by others like Islam. Karen said, archaeology and history are a great love of mine. American immigrant from England, and a childhood in rich historical holidays. Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, that's cool. We speak English here. I hope you can understand me. You're from England. Sorry, bad. Pax Romana. So yeah, we did a video about the spread of Christianity. Why? And it was titled, this is around Christmas. Why then? Why was Jesus born when he was and where he was? I mean, God could have had him born anywhere, but you had all sorts of things that contributed to the spread of Christianity early, even when it was being persecuted. And the persecution actually could have helped the spread too, because it got them out of Jerusalem. You had the Hellenization with Alexander the Great. You had Pax Romana, like you mentioned, and a bunch of other elements that helped spread the word very early on. And Hutchie said, Karen Weiss, okay. The Scottish man said, I want to hear him speak. There is a ton of archaeology in the UK, of course. In Israel, you can do a one-day volunteer dig in Jerusalem, in the city of David area, even in Shiloh. I would love to do that. I would wonder if they would have a problem with some of the volunteers, though, saying, I think I'll take this little thing as a souvenir. Had to do a pat down on them or something.
Maybe they pay extra for that. Don't know. Counts how much
I would think that if you find anything, everything's got to be kept there. You can't take anything with you. Allowed the spread of Christianity and barely. I don't know what that's referring to. Okay, so we have looking back at Jericho. So where does Jericho fit in the Bible? This should be pretty easy. We were just looking at Jericho previously, next to Ai, and the scripture for it said, "Then people of Israel set out and camped in the plains of Moab beyond the Jordan at Jericho." So we're talking about this land here, and of course, there's many more scriptures that talk about this. This is just one, but we're looking at where the occasions are in the Bible where it speaks about it. We have with Jericho, Jericho's portrayal in the Bible was particularly in the story of the conquest of Canaan, and it has been the subject of debate among scholars, with some questioning the accuracy of the biblical accounts of Jericho's destruction and the archaeological findings on the site. Well, and here you have, again, another artist's rendition of what the city looked like. This is much bigger than Ai. You have two large concentric walls here. And on this outside wall, you have a stone retaining wall that the main wall was on top of. This is a mud brick wall that was constructed on top of the retaining wall. This is the outer wall of it. And then when there was the march around Jericho by the Israelites, you had the collapse of that mud brick wall, which then allowed you like a ramp to go up to the city. And being a ramp, that was one of the problems with these cities being on hills. You have the extra defensive elevation, and it would make it more difficult for an army then to advance upon the city to breach that higher wall. You'd either have to have ladders or something, but when the wall falls down, like it did, it allows them to come in, an army to come in and take it. So skeptics pointed out that there was these discrepancies, and the absence, again, of evidence was, hey, we don't know where the city is exactly. There does appear to be a city of Jericho here, but it's not Bronze Age. This is much later. In archaeological excavations led by Catherine Kenyon in the 1950s, uncovered the remains of ancient Jericho, including the fortifications and residential structures. Radiocarbon dating of the artifacts found at the site indicated the occupation during the late Bronze Age, corresponding to the biblical period of Joshua. And then, of course, here we have the collapsed walls as being evidence provided. Once these walls came down like this, they discovered all these bricks outside of these baked bricks, outside of a retention wall, like what you have here. And on top of that, in the excavation, they found a layer of burnt debris, as in the city was destroyed. It was a pretty hefty layer. So the archaeological discoveries at Jericho provided tangible evidence for its existence. It corroborated aspects of the biblical account, contributing to our understanding of the ancient city and its role in biblical history. Again, this is where I refer you to that video or otherwise in the description. And we move on to Nineveh. And I checked the chat just before I do. Souvenir taking was a huge early pilgrim travel. Huge in early pilgrim travels, sadly. Yeah, I would think so. I mean, you're going all that way, you might as well take something with you, right?
Yeah.
That was a problem. And there are some would say that when we get to Nineveh, the next one, there were actual large panels and other parts of the city that were taken back, huge statues and so forth, that were taken back to England. And I believe they're in the London museum in London, if I remember. They what they did is they reconstructed certain parts of the city of Nineveh. And there might be someone that would say, hey, why are these Westerners here taking this? Well, if they had a deal with the Iraqi government at that time, that would be okay. But maybe you can say, hey, this is our national heritage that you're taking. I mean, you might have a good argument for that. On the other hand, you consider all the wars in that area, not just the most recent Iraq war with the U.S., but also the Iraq-Iran war in the 1980s and so forth. All these wars over time, those artifacts would probably have been destroyed. So at least we're keeping them safe. And the whole reconstruction, everything within that museum, it's a pretty cool thing to see. Again, the
British
video
Museum, by the way.
British Museum?
Yes. Correction.
Thank
British
you.
Museum.
Thank you. A brother in the UK would know. I'm curious. Have you been to it? That would be interesting. Thomas Hall said, peace treaties like old England between peace treaties like old England between the Brits and invading Vikings often include the Viking leaders having to convert and be baptized. Yes. Yeah. And there's some, so you're going back to the whole,
well, to be honest with you, that's not necessarily a bad thing, considering part of their religion was human sacrifice. I'm not sure if I'd want them on the. You think about that from their standpoint, though. If you're just thinking about some of the traditions that the Vikings brought with them, with their religion, was human sacrifice, I'm not sure if you want that local.
Right.
Considering the people they use for the human sacrifice often were the people that you knew.
So it's almost like saying, I don't know if this would be a good equivalent or not, but if you have a judge who has somebody who is a repeat offender come forth and says, listen, you've got to go for this rehabilitation program. we're talking about prison time, but then following your prison time, you have to go through Alcoholics Anonymous or some other program. And I could almost look at this and saying, you Vikings have been some bad boys. You need a little bit of rehabilitation going on here. And in order to do this, here's part of the program. Okay. This is, we won the war. You got to face up. You got to do this deal. I guess maybe that's a good equivalent for it. Haji said, I've been to the museum, but not for long enough. You need a solid week to take in the British Museum. And I would probably take a little longer. I'm one of those people that you've probably gone to museums with people like me that want to stop and read everything, want to soak it in. And meanwhile, the rest of the family and the kids are screaming and they're going the other way. And your wife is yelling at you, come on, we don't have all day. And I thought, what? What are we here for? I want to take more time. Viking plundered those monasteries for real. Yeah, what was it? Linda. This was, and Hutchie can really help me out with this one. This is one of the first places that the Vikings had hit. It was a great monastery, and the Vikings were not, the monks of this monastery weren't expecting it. They saw these ships coming and they thought, oh, no problem, until they got ransacked. And it is. I was hoping you'd give the interpretation there.
There you go.
Oh, there we go. Yes, thank you. Lindisfarne. Yes, thank you. I knew it was Linda something. Linda had something to do with it. I don't remember her last name. Linda's last name is Farn. So there you go. And that's me. I read everything. Made high schoolers go to DC with me and drove them insane. I could imagine. Imagine. Well, I think what you need to do in those excavations is have those people that want to take their time, have them in their own little group, and everybody else run around and maybe go get some pizza or something like that. The rest of us do a fast as we march through the museum to explore everything that we can. So Nineveh is the next one, and Nineveh's account is, let me put this and throw this out to you guys. It sounds like you all are pretty well read up on this, so I know I'm going to get the right answer on this. What is Nineveh? It's a city, but what type of city? What
nationality?
Well, nationality. Okay. What kingdom or empire is it in? And what role did it play in the biblical narrative? And I can think of one prophet for sure who would have been mostly responsible or mostly associated with Nineveh. And Hutchie's got it right on the nose. It is Jonah. And the next question is, what civilization or what kingdom or empire is it associated with? Nineveh. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, rise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for the evil there has come up before me. And in the chat, we have...
There you go.
There we go. Babylon?
Nope.
Nope.
The last one. There you go.
Assyria. So the Assyrian Empire, and here we have a map basically of the full extent of the Assyrian Empire. They came through, and so you have Babylon, which is the empire that came before Nineveh, and then you have the Assyrian Empire. I'm sorry, the Assyrian Empire came before the Neo-Babylonian Empire. The Assyrian Empire's capital was Assyria. Now, these guys were nasty. They were terrible. They had a bad name. They were, I don't know if you want to say they were the Nazis of their day, but they were really rough, nasty characters. They basically spread as far as they could, and you can see where they even conquered Egypt at the time. And one of the practices that they did is they would, when they conquered a new nation or territory, is they would scatter those people throughout the empire. And this was a technique that was used to help suppress any kind of uprising with these people. So when they're captured, they're scattered. And Assyria is the empire that captured or conquered northern kingdom of Israel. Israel had had a civil war, divided into northern kingdom called Israel and the southern kingdom called Judah, and had two tribes, Judah and Benjamin. The northern kingdom had the other 10 tribes. And they just walked away from God. They just basically, almost as soon as they had their divided after the civil war, they said, we're done. We're done with God, basically, and they just went their own way. And there's prophets that went to them and said, you guys got to turn, you got to turn, you got to turn. Assyria came over and conquered them. God warned them, says, hey, listen, guys, you keep this up, this is going to happen. Well, it did happen, and they were taken. And even though you see in the map here that Judah was within the Assyrian Empire, they're really an enclave there. They were not really taken by Assyria. They were taken by Babylon. Although the king there was taken, is more of a subjugated territory. So Nineveh, what happened here, and why is this even a question with archaeological research? There we go. Why is this even a question at all with finding this city? Nineveh was the capital of the ancient Assyrian Empire and is prominently mentioned in the Bible, particularly in connection with the prophet Jonah and his mission. Despite the significance, doubts regarding Nineveh's existence persisted until archaeological excavations brought the ancient city to light. And you see here one of the reconstructed gates. Here are some of the ruins of the city of Nineveh. There's an outer wall here. This mound is actually an outer wall that was there. Some scholars, especially in the mid-19th century, questioned the historicity of Nineveh. Again, dating, like, hey, we can't find it, so therefore it doesn't exist. One of the most significant figures associated with the rediscovery and excavation of Nineveh was a British archaeologist, Austin Henry Layard. In the mid-19th century, Layard conducted excavations at the site of Nineveh, uncovering extensive remains of the ancient city, including monumental palaces, temples, and fortifications. Inscriptions found at the site, including royal annals and administrative records, provided concrete evidence of Nineveh's existence as the capital of the Assyrian Empire. And artifacts uncovered at the city's ruins offered insights to the Assyrian culture, religion, governance, confirming Nineveh's significance as a major urban center of antiquity. One of the cool things about this one, too, was that Nineveh is also some of the archaeology that we found there, some of the evidence, some of the things we uncovered, the stone inscriptions and cuneiform that was found there, identify Israel and identify very clear things about Israel, like Lachish, one of the major cities of Israel, being conquered, how they were not able to conquer Jerusalem, and why. But the king of Jerusalem was taken captive, and I believe he was blinded. He was taken back to Assyria. There's a whole real cool history about this. These people had conquered everything going through. They just bulldozed, and they hit a big roadblock when they hit Jerusalem. They were not able to conquer it. And again, I would refer you to the video here where it goes into further explanation about the evidence found for Israel and Jerusalem in that area and bringing that out. Checking the chat again, it's cursed in the Bible. Let me see. It's cursed in the Bible and says nothing will grow. There are only shepherds and sheep and goats, and that's how it is today. Yes, that and the next city that we're going to take a look at too, Babylon. So yeah, that was both those places. That's another thing about that is the Bible says you guys are cursed. It's never going to happen again, and that's the case. It happened to Jericho. it happened to Nineveh, and it happened to Babylon. All of those, and you see evidence of them not being, nothing being left there, no habitation. The trade routes from Joppa to the boat would go around that way. Okay, so I think we're hitting. Okay, Sennacherib. Yeah, Sennacherib was the king that, or the king of Babylon during the attack or the siege of Jerusalem. So his name comes up a lot there too. All right, going to the next one. And this is the last one we're going to look at. So we're looking at these 5 cities. The last one we have on the list is Babylon. So far, which each of these, I'm curious in terms of the record in Islam, how far out does either Quran or the Hadiths go in statement about places around them? I know that Jerusalem.
Quran, they do cover Jerusalem. It's very clear in the Quran that Jerusalem belongs to the Israelites, to the Jews. And that's the way Allah intended it, which is incredibly stupid that that Muslims are fighting, trying to claim it, which is like, guys, this was very clear in the Quran. This belongs to them according to it. We want to use it as the evidence for it. There are a lot of different historical claims there in the Quran. I'd say most specifically, and probably the biggest one, is the moon splitting in the 6th century.
Oh, okay.
According to the Hadith, that happened.
So as far as archaeology goes,
I'd say that's the biggest one.
We can't really excavate the moon. Well, I guess on
yes,
moon
we have done some study of it. And
yes,
it didn't split in the 6th
so
century.
Obviously we know that. Obviously we know that. But in terms of the other cities around, we know that Jerusalem is mentioned, and maybe there's
Jerusalem's mentioned. They mention, of course, Medina and Mecca. Questions about those. They make claims that somehow Abraham got down there and made the Kaaba, which again, no historical evidence that ever occurred.
Yeah, that's a big one too. So the claims about what Abraham had done, and the claims that also that Muhammad had made his way to Jerusalem, correct?
Yes, during the night flight, visited the furthest mosque on a flying horse with a human head.
Okay.
And it didn't exist.
Okay. So we're going to take a look at Babylon, the next one coming up. And you can see on the screen here where it's located, again, in the Fertile Crescent in modern-day Iraq. So most of these cities that have been excavated, that were thought to have been maybe made up in the Bible, maybe not really reliable, the Bible not really being a reliable source about it, it appears again that the Bible was a reliable source concerning this city. So we have an account in the Bible concerning this in Jonah 1, verses 1 through 2. Because of our fathers have angered the God of heaven, and he gave them over to the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, the Chaldean, who destroyed this house and carried away the people to Babylonia. So this is the city is the name Babylon. It is the capital of the Babylonian Empire. Remember how we had Assyria? Looked very similar to the extent that Babylon had gone. Babylon took over the Assyrian Empire, and then Jerusalem did fall, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem were scattered. Many of them were brought back to Babylon and lived there until they returned under the Persian Empire. But Babylon was one of the most renowned cities of antiquity, features prominently in the Bible, particularly in connection with the Babylonian exile of the Israelites. Despite its fame, skepticism regarding Babylon's historicity persisted until excavations again proved the incontrovertible evidence of the city's existence. Doubts regarding Babylon's historicity stem from challenges reconciling biblical accounts with the historical and archaeological evidence. But as we dug deeper, we found that, hey, it looks like it all does match up. Excavations conducted in modern-day Iraq have covered the ruins of ancient Babylon, and this is including the Ishtar Gate. This is an artist's reconstruction of what it could have been with its famed hanging gardens under Nebuchadnezzar. Here is an artist's rendition of the Ishtar Gate that is going. So you have all these things that are, it was a beautiful place. Unlike the Assyrians, this is more, seemed to be more bent towards maybe a little bit more culture, maybe a little bit more friendly, but still they're a conquering empire. And if you don't watch back, they'll take you over. So we uncovered a wealth of artifacts unearthed at Babylon's ruins, such as statues, reliefs, pottery, that attested to the prominence of the culture of economic hub in the ancient Near East. Now, as you mentioned earlier, we had, as you mentioned earlier, Karen, this land now is pretty much desolate. If you go to look at it, there is basically nothing left. There is just a place for scavenging dogs, hounds, birds of prey. Nobody lives there. It's not worth living. And if you look at this video, you will find more evidence that goes into it. A really good description of the finds of Babylon. Taking a look at
the night journey. Yeah.
So
yeah, that's Muhammad's night journey where he goes to sleep and he goes on a flying horse to Jerusalem, flying horse with human head to Jerusalem, and then ascends into the 7 heavens that are physically above us, visits each one, eventually arriving at Moses, and then going up to meet Allah, who says, hey, Muslims need to pray 50 times a day. And he goes back down to Moses there, and he says, that's a lot. Go back. Ask for lower. And he repeats this like quite a few times, eventually getting the number down to 5.
Sounds like Abraham with talking to God about if there are 10 good people in the city of Sodom, would you?
What gets me about that is, so Moses is more merciful to the people than Allah is, but Allah is supposed to be the most merciful.
That's a good point.
So Moses there is more merciful than both Allah and Muhammad, because he keeps asking Muhammad to go back. Eventually, Muhammad just says, I'm too embarrassed to go back. I don't want to go back again. And that's why they're stuck with 5. But
okay.
That's Hadith, not Quran.
Okay. And then we have Hutchie said, it didn't Saddam Hussein rebuild the Ishtar Gate? I believe you are correct. And I believe we had one of the images of that as well, showing that. So, yeah, he is a ruthless dictator. Yeah, he was a bad guy. But, there's some good things that came out of it.
He liked building statues of himself.
He did. It was, I think it was
silver lining to everything.
I think it was a part of the nationalism of Iraq, wanting to show that we had deep roots. So part of the excavations that were done. I don't know. I can't really speculate on his motivation for doing it, but it does seem like that was part of the reason. So we have coming up next week, we're going to dig deeper into Dune and looking at possibly, I'm not 100% sure we're going to handle it this way. The last video that we had for Dune and Dune religion kind of blew up. And here's an example of wanting to be able to present yourself in a way to the world to say, hey, we want to look at this from a Christian perspective. And it's been fun. It's been interesting. And we're looking next week, at the end of next week also, we're going to be going to the movies, going to take a look at it and give you a fresh review right out of the movies. I believe we have that planned for not this Saturday, but next Saturday, the day after the theatrical release. And looking forward to it. It's going to be good. And hope to all see you all then. Until then, enjoy the rest of your week and the weekend, and we'll see you on Tuesday.